Lee pressed her boarding pass to the scanner and forced a polite smile at the gate agent. "Have a good flight," the woman said automatically, not knowing how those simple words would echo in his mind hours later. Moved down the narrow jet bridge, her carry-on bumping her knee with every step. She'd been traveling all week for a tech seminar in Denver, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. Now, she was just desperate to get home to Seattle, to her dog, her own bed, and one weekend of quiet before her next project deadline hit. Seat 21A, window seat, her favorite. She liked watching the world shrink below her, loved the stillness above the clouds. The man beside her, mid-40s and buried in a sports magazine, gave her a quick nod but didn't speak. Perfect. She just wanted silence. As the engines whined to life, closed her eyes. The hum of the cabin felt familiar, almost comforting. The shuffling of passengers, the flight attendants' cheerful instructions, the faint scent of brewed coffee mixing with jet fuel. Routine, predictable, safe. At 30,000 feet, took a sip of her ginger ale, watching the sunlight scatter over the Rockies below. It was one of those rare flights where everything felt peaceful. She scrolled through her phone, glanced out the window again, and smiled faintly. Then the plane shuddered. Just once, like a bump on a rough road, she barely noticed, but seconds later it jolted again, harder. Her cup tipped, spilling soda across her tray table. Gasps rippled through the cabin. The fasten sign blinked on. The flight attendant's calm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and please remain seated. We've hit a patch of unexpected turbulence." Tightened her heart rate picked up, but she told herself it was nothing. Planes hit turbulence all the time. She'd been through worse. Then came the third jolt, violent this time. The entire cabin seemed to drop for a full second. Laptops flew. Someone screamed. Overhead compartments rattled, spilling a backpack into the aisle. The engines roared louder. The plane pitched left, then right. A man, 2 rows ahead, shouted, "What's happening?" His hand shot to the armrest, knuckles white. The sound of oxygen masks dropping made her stomach twist. She looked up, hers dangled inches from her face. She grabbed it, but before she could pull it over her mouth, she heard the flight attendant's panicked voice, not over the intercom, but right in the aisle. "Oh my God, he's down, the pilot, he's down." His head snapped toward the front of the plane. The attendant's face was ghostly pale, her hands shaking as she clutched a radio. "What do you mean he's down?" someone yelled. "I said the pilot's unconscious." The cabin erupted into noise, screams, sobs, confusion. The plane tilted again, more violently this time, and felt her stomach rise into her throat. The co-pilot's voice came faintly through the speakers, broken, slurred, then silent. "Ladies and please," then nothing. The engines groaned. The plane was climbing too steep, then dropping too fast. His instincts, buried under years of civilian life, flickered awake. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, back when she'd been in Air Force ROTC. "In chaos, find your checklist. Don't panic, assess." She forced herself to breathe. Around her, people clutched one another, praying. The man beside her mumbled, "We're not gonna make it." Wanted to shout at him to make him stop, but her throat felt dry. Then, through the panic, she saw a flight attendant sprinting toward the cockpit, pounding on the locked door. "Captain, Captain, can you hear me?" No answer. A moment later, the attendant spun around, eyes wide, scanning the cabin, searching for something, or someone. Her gaze stopped on. "You," she shouted, pushing through the aisle. "You're Lee, right? You were Air Force ROTC in college." Blinked. "What? How do you?" "Your friend up front told me before she passed out. You trained in simulators, didn't you?" His heart thudded so hard it hurt. "That was years ago," she said. "I've never flown for real." The plane bucked again. Overhead bins burst open. The attendant grabbed her wrist. "We don't have time. The co-pilot's out cold and autopilot's disengaged." Stared toward the cockpit door, the red "Do Not Enter" sign flashing above it. The engines roared, the cabin lights flickered, a baby cried somewhere behind her. The attendant said, voice cracking, "You're the only one who might know what to do." Wanted to refuse, to stay in her seat and let someone else handle it, but no one else stood up, no one else even moved. Something deep inside her, discipline she thought she'd lost, clicked back into place. She unbuckled, "Let's go." The attendant led her forward, gripping for balance. The aisle tilted as the plane lurched again. When they reached the cockpit, could hear alarms screaming behind the door. The attendant swiped and pushed it open. What saw froze her blood. Both pilots slumped in their seats, one barely breathing, the other still. Smoke curled from a control panel. Warning lights flashed like sirens in hell. His reflection stared back at her in the cracked windshield, terrified, trembling, and yet resolute. The radio crackled. A calm, distant voice asked, "Flight 392, do you read?" Looked at the empty seats. Then she stepped forward. Her voice barely a whisper, she said the words that would change everything. "This is Lee, passenger in seat 21A. Both pilots are down." Hands shook as she stepped into the cockpit. Red and amber lights blinked across the control panel like angry eyes. Alarms wailed, a shrill, constant reminder that the jet was flying without anyone truly flying it. The smell of burnt wiring and coffee filled the narrow space. "Dear God," the flight attendant whispered behind her. Both pilots were slumped forward, one breathing faintly, the other still. His mind screamed at her to back away, to sit down, to pretend this wasn't happening. But another voice, stronger, quieter, spoke inside her. "If you don't move, everyone dies." "Seattle Center, do you read?" Grabbed the radio headset and spoke into the mic. "This is passenger Lee on flight 392. Both pilots are unconscious. I repeat, both pilots are down." Static, then a man's voice, calm but clipped, came through. "Flight 392, this is Seattle Center. Copy that. Can you confirm your current altitude?" Glanced at the dials. 29,000 and dropping, planes unstable. "Okay," the voice said. "Listen carefully. We're going to help you, do not panic. Can you access the yoke, the control column in front of you?" She looked at the massive wheel before her, her heart hammered. "Yes, I've got it." "Good, take a deep breath. Place your hands at the 9 and 3 positions. Keep your movements small, very small. The aircraft will respond slower than you expect. Level the wings first." Her grip tightened. She eased the yoke gently left, then right. The aircraft rolled in response, less violently this time. "Good job, you're flying her now." The words hit her like a shockwave. "You're flying her." Behind her, the flight attendant gasped. What did he say? Swallowed, he said, "I'm flying the plane." The attendant covered her mouth. "Oh my God." The intercom crackled again. "What experience do you have?" "Basic simulator training," she admitted. "Air Force ROTC 10 years ago, nothing real." "That's okay. We'll handle the rest. I'll be your eyes and your hands from here, just listen." Nodded, her breathing ragged. Her old training, dusty, half-forgotten, flickered to life. Airspeed, altitude, attitude. The 3 A's. Her instructor's voice from long ago echoed in her mind. When everything falls apart, focus on what you can control. "Seattle Center, we're stable for now," she said, "but the autopilot's flashing red." "That means it's disengaged," the controller replied. "You're flying manual. Keep your heading steady, 260. The number glowed faintly on the navigation display. Nudged the yoke until the digital line centered. The violent shaking eased slightly. "Good," said the voice. "You're doing great. What's your airspeed?" She scanned the gauge. 280 knots. "Perfect. Maintain that. You're keeping 143 people alive right now." The words punched her in the chest. 143 lives. Every cry, every whisper from the cabin, they were all counting on her. A male flight attendant appeared behind her. "Passengers are panicking. They want updates." She didn't look away from the instruments. Tell them we're in contact with air traffic control. Tell them we have a plan. He nodded, running back. Seattle Center, she said, trying to steady her tone. I see flashing warnings on the right side of the panel. The controller paused. Describe them. Fuel imbalance and engine temperature rising. Roger that. You'll need to shut off the bleed air switch on engine 2. It's right above your head, top row, third switch. Craned her neck, scanning the maze of toggles. Got it. She flipped it, holding her breath. The red warning dimmed. Excellent, the voice said. You just prevented an engine fire. Exhaled shakily. Okay, she whispered, I can do this. Then the plane jolted again. The nose dipped and alarms screamed anew. Seattle Center, she yelled. We're losing altitude. Pull back slightly on the yoke, not too hard. Did as told. The horizon steadied. Her heartbeat pounded so loud it drowned the wind. Beautiful work, the controller said. You're holding altitude. The flight attendant behind her exhaled loudly. You just saved us from going into a nosedive. Didn't answer, she couldn't. Her mind was locked in focus. Every second felt stretched, electric, fragile. The controller's voice softened. You're doing something extraordinary. I want you to know that. She blinked back, tears. Just get us home. Copy that, he said. Stay on course 260. You're clear for a gradual descent. We'll have emergency crews ready. Glanced once more at the unconscious pilots. The captain's hand still rested on the throttle. She gently moved it back, steadying the speed. Outside, thunder rumbled through the dark clouds. Lightning flickered across the sky like veins of white fire. The jet carried on, silent except for breathing and the hum of the engines. In seat 21A, her life had been ordinary. Now, she was holding 143 others between heaven and disaster. And somewhere deep inside, she realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life, Lee was truly flying. The headset crackled again. Flight 392, this is Seattle Center. You're doing fine, let's take it step by step. How are your wings? Knuckles were white around the yoke. Leveled, I think, the storm's rough. Good, keep her steady. Altimeter shows 27,000 feet. You're going to begin a slow descent to 10,000. Nice and gradual. We've got you. Glanced at the panel, reading numbers she hadn't seen in years. Her breathing was shallow, but her mind had shifted into something new, focused, mechanical, determined. She stopped trembling. Every movement now had purpose. The flight attendant hovered behind her. People are praying back there. Some are recording messages to their families. Didn't look away from the sky. Tell them not to give up. We're going home. The attendant hesitated. And if we do? His voice hardened. We will. Outside, lightning danced along the clouds like electric veins. The wind howled against the fuselage, rattling the cockpit. But's grip never faltered. She eased the throttle just as the controller instructed. Beautiful correction, the voice praised. You're a natural pilot. Her throat tightened. No, I'm just terrified enough to listen. The controller chuckled faintly, the first human sound since the chaos began. Fear can be your best co-pilot. Keep trusting your instincts. She followed every order like a soldier. Adjust pitch, check vertical speed. Balance the rudder trim. Each task pulled her further from panic, closer to clarity. Her training, long forgotten, came rushing back like it had been waiting for this very moment. She remembered the simulator room from her college days, the smell of cold metal, her instructor leaning over her shoulder, saying, "You'll never really know what you're made of until you're in the air alone." At the time, she thought it was metaphorical. Now it was. Seattle Center, she said, voice steadier. We've begun descent. Airspeed holding at 270. Perfect. We're watching you on radar. Winds are heavy near Seattle, so you'll approach from the south. We'll have Chord Air Base assist if needed. Nodded, sweat tracing down her temple. Copy that. Suddenly, a loud bang shook the cabin. The plane lurched left so sharply the attendant slammed into the door, gritted her teeth, fighting the controls. Seattle Center, we've got a problem. Plane's rolling left. The controller's tone turned sharp. Right rudder, counter now. Stomped the right pedal. The jet resisted, groaning like something alive. It's not responding. Hold it, keep pressure, slow, steady pressure. The aircraft trembled violently, but slowly, painfully, it began to right itself. The voice in her ear softened again. That's it, you're back. You just corrected a roll that would torn the wings off. His vision blurred. Her arms ached. She hadn't realized she'd been crying until a tear splashed onto her hand. Still with me? The controller asked. Still here, she whispered. Behind her, the flight attendant clutched the wall. How are you still standing? I don't know, said, but if I stop now, we fall. Minutes passed, long, breathless minutes where every second felt borrowed. The plane finally steadied. The storm outside began to thin. Through a break in the clouds, saw something faint but beautiful, sunlight. It glimmered across the horizon like hope itself. Seattle Center, she said, I can see light breaking through. Good sign, you're about 70 miles out. We'll hand you off to approach control soon. You're doing incredible. Her lips trembled. Tell them I'm not a hero, I'm just trying to survive. The voice replied gently, heroes never think they are. His muscles burned, her back ached, but she didn't care. Somewhere below, families waited for news, loved ones praying for a miracle. She refused to be the reason they didn't get one. The radio beeped again. A new voice came through, deeper, steady, military. Flight 392, this is Cord Air Base. We've got you on radar. You're slightly east of your glide path. Blinked through sweat. Copy that, Cord. You're doing fine, ma'am. Adjust heading 170. We'll take you in. She followed their instructions, her body running on instinct and adrenaline. Outside, the clouds parted further. City lights shimmered far below, scattered like fallen stars. Passengers began to stir in the cabin, whispers spreading that someone, a passenger, was flying the plane. In that moment, realized what was happening wasn't just survival. It was history unfolding 30,000 feet above the ground. She looked at the unconscious pilots, then at the endless sky ahead. Cord, she said softly, this is seat 21A, let's get these people home. Storm wasn't finished with them yet. Thunder rumbled so close it shook the cabin, and lightning flashed across the clouds, illuminating the terrified faces of passengers through the cockpit window. Knuckles were raw from gripping the yoke. Every muscle ached, yet she refused to release her hold. She was flying a 737 without a single fully trained pilot on board, and she knew every second counted. Seattle Center, she said, voice tight, descending. Current altitude 23,000, airspeed 270 knots. The storm is intense. You're handling it well, the controller replied. Maintain heading 260. Focus on your instruments, not the turbulence. You've got this. Exhaled shakily. She scanned the dials, airspeed, altitude, heading, vertical speed, all numbers jumbled in her mind like a puzzle she had to solve in seconds. She tapped the autopilot panel, double-checking it was still disengaged. Each adjustment had to be perfect. Too much pressure on the yoke and the plane would stall. Too little and they'd fall into the mountains. A sudden jolt threw her body forward, knocking her against the instrument panel. Sparks danced along a corner of the cockpit. She winced, tasting metal and burnt wires in the air. Seattle Center, she shouted. The turbulence, it's breaking the plane. Keep calm, the controller's voice cut through. You're in control, don't. Gradual adjustments, small, deliberate movements. His mind replayed her ROTC training like a film. Check instruments first. Airspeed, altitude, attitude, cross-check everything. Trust the aircraft, trust yourself. She let the lessons flow into muscle memory. The plane lurched again, violent and terrifying, but her hands guided it like a conductor guiding a symphony. The flight attendant appeared behind her, pale and shaking. "Ma'am, the passengers, they're praying." Swallowed hard, she wanted to cry, scream, collapse, but she didn't. "Tell them we're okay for now. We're listening. I'm still flying." Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours. The plane's nose dipped slightly as wind gusted from the storm and instinctively pulled back on the yoke, stabilizing the descent. The radio crackled. "Flight 392, you're holding well," said Seattle Center. "Prepare for approach instructions. You're going to need to descend to 10,000 feet before intercepting the glide path. Keep heading 260 for now." Nodded, though the controller couldn't see her. The words 10,000 feet echoed in her head like a drumbeat, still so far above the ground, still so terrifyingly high. She adjusted the throttles slightly, ensuring the plane remained stable. Her muscles burned from tension, her chest ached from adrenaline. Every breath was calculated, every heartbeat a countdown. Below her, clouds parted briefly, revealing glimpses of the jagged Cascades. She swallowed. Too close. If she misjudged even a fraction, they'd hit the peaks. The radio buzzed again. "Wind shear ahead. Adjust your pitch carefully, 30 degrees maximum. You can do this." Her heart pounded like a war drum. She adjusted the yoke, easing the plane's descent, following the controller's instructions perfectly. The passengers' screams faded as she focused entirely on the cockpit instruments. A small sense of rhythm returned. Every check, every gauge, every warning light became a guide, not a threat. Her mind worked furiously. Fuel levels, engine temperatures, flap settings. Her training returned in fragments, the simulators, the classroom drills, the Air Force lectures, all converged into this moment. She glanced back at the flight attendant. "I can see ground through the clouds," said. Her voice was weak but firm. "We're getting closer." The attendant's face lit with a mixture of hope and terror. "Keep her steady. We're almost there." Lightning cracked again, closer this time, making the plane shudder violently. But's hands didn't waver. She leaned forward slightly, peering through the cockpit window, tracking the faint glow of the distant city. Seattle wasn't just a city now. It was salvation, a sliver of light piercing a storm that threatened to swallow them whole. Whispered to herself, "You can do this. Just one step at a time, one step at a time." And for the first time, amid thunder, wind, and chaos, she felt a strange, fragile confidence. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was the pilot. Hands ached from gripping the yoke, but she refused to let go. The plane had stabilized for a moment, but then a sharp red light flashed on the instrument panel. Low fuel. Her stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on altitude, turbulence, and wind shear, she hadn't realized how close they were to running out. "Seattle Center, Flight 392, she said, voice trembling but steady, fuel warning, critical levels. "We need instructions." The controller's voice was calm, almost soothing. "You're doing great. Listen carefully. You'll need to conserve throttle. Maintain glide speed, avoid sudden maneuvers. We're guiding you." Swallowed hard, her throat dry. Glide speed. She remembered the simulator instructions from years ago, but this was no simulator. Real engines, real passengers, real stakes. Her pulse thundered as she nudged the throttle carefully, balancing power and descent. One wrong move and the engines could flame out entirely. Behind her, the flight attendant's face was pale as she leaned against the cockpit wall. "Ma'am, people are praying, some are crying." Didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was locked in, calculating each movement like a chess game with death. Suddenly, an alarm blared, different from the others. Smoke curled faintly near Engine 2. She instinctively checked the panel. "Temperature rising, Engine 2 is overheating." "Copy that," the controller said. "Shut off the bleed air switch on Engine 2. Carefully, don't." Craned her neck, scanning the dizzying maze of switches. She found it, flicked it, and held her breath. The warning dimmed. She exhaled shakily. Another catastrophe averted, at least for now. The wind screamed against the fuselage. Rain pounded the windshield in relentless sheets. Lightning split the sky. The plane shuddered as turbulence battered it from all sides. Its vision blurred with sweat, tears, and exhaustion. She barely noticed the pressure in her chest, the fatigue threatening to collapse her body. "Seattle Center," she said, trying to steady her voice. "We're holding altitude, but wind shear is worsening. Visibility is near zero." "You're doing fine. Keep her level, maintain glide speed. Adjust heading 10 degrees west. You can do this." Nodded, though no one could see her. Her body moved on pure instinct, fine motor skills honed in ROTC training and years of practice. Simulated, yes, but now real, unforgiving, and life-threatening. She nudged the yoke slightly, adjusting for turbulence, corrected the rudder, and kept the wings steady. The flight attendant's voice broke through. "Ma'am, we're losing cabin pressure in Section 3. His heart leapt. Oxygen masks had dropped earlier, but the turbulence had caused leaks. Panic rose behind her eyes, but she forced it down. "Not now," she whispered. "Not today." She checked the altimeter. 10,000 feet, the controller's instructions, still far above but descending. She nudged the throttles again, careful not to strain the engines. Sweat streamed down her face, soaking her hair. Every second felt like a minute, every minute like an hour. Then a small sliver of light appeared through the storm. A city glowing faintly through clouds and rain. Seattle, the promise of safety. Her chest tightened. Hope wasn't gone. "Seattle Center, I see ground," she gasped, nearly yelling. "Good, stay focused. You've handled the worst. Let's bring her home." She adjusted flaps, monitored the instruments, and guided the plane toward the city lights. Each gust of wind was a reminder. Failure was just a heartbeat away. But's grip never faltered. The passengers began to murmur, sensing something extraordinary. Somewhere a child whispered, "Mommy, is the pilot a real person?" His lips pressed together. She didn't answer, but inside she felt something powerful. Fear was still there. Exhaustion gnawed at her, but she was no longer just a passenger. She was the pilot, and she would not fail, not today. Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating the city below. The runway lights glimmered faintly through the storm. Salvation was close, but the plane was still fragile, the systems failing, the wind unforgiving. Whispered, barely audible even to herself, "Almost there, almost home." The next decision she made would determine everything, lives, futures, and her own. Fingers ached from hours of tension, but she couldn't stop. The storm had relented slightly, yet the plane shuddered violently with every gust of wind. Suddenly, the headset went dead. Static hissed, then silence. No controller, no guidance, just the low hum of engines and her own ragged breathing. Her stomach dropped. "Seattle Center, Cord, can anyone hear me?" Only static. A wave of panic threatened to overwhelm her. This was it, she thought. Alone, no guidance, no backup. She forced herself to inhale, counting to 5, then exhaling slowly. Years of ROTC drills surged to her memory: assess, prioritize, act. The first priority: regain control. She scanned the cockpit frantically. Flight instruments flashed warnings: wind shear, fuel imbalance, unstable airspeed. The engines groaned, one sputtering briefly. She felt the throttle, nudging it carefully to maintain speed. Every adjustment had to be precise. Too little and the plane would stall, too much and they'd overshoot the glide path. Through the shattered storm outside, she glimpsed faint lights far below. Seattle. Salvation. Her pulse thumped. 143 lives were in her hands, yet she felt the terrifying weight of responsibility crush her chest. She couldn't allow hesitation. Then a voice, barely audible through the static, cracked the silence. "Flight 392, we've got you, Cord Air Base." Exhaled sharply. "Copy that," she whispered, nearly crying. Relief and terror collided. "We're unstable, heading is off, need instructions." "Understood," the voice replied steadily. "You're slightly east of your glide path. Correct heading 15 degrees west. Maintain current altitude and speed. We'll guide you visually." obeyed, adjusting the yoke in tiny, deliberate movements. The plane groaned, resisting her, but slowly it began to respond. The city lights shimmered ahead, fragmented through lingering clouds. Her eyes darted to the fuel gauge, critical. She swallowed hard, mentally calculating time to descent, engine strain and wind shear. You cannot fail. A sudden gust caught the fuselage, tilting the plane sharply. Slammed her hand against the yoke, twisting violently to counteract. Sparks flickered across the cockpit panel. Smoke drifted faintly. The engines threatened to stall. "Not now," she whispered. "Not here, not today." She remembered her instructor's voice from years ago. Control what you can, ignore what you can't. She focused entirely on the instruments, the artificial horizon, airspeed indicator, altimeter. Each readout became a lifeline, a guide through the chaos. "Flaps," she muttered to herself, scanning switches. The guidance from Cord crackled faintly. "Deploy gradually as you descend. Don't overdo it. Maintain glide speed." Her hand moved, trembling, flipping the switches slowly. The aircraft stabilized slightly. Sweat poured down her face, soaking her hair and blurring her vision. Behind her, the flight attendant whispered urgently, "Ma'am, cabin pressure is fluctuating in the rear. Passengers are scared, some are screaming." Swallowed, she couldn't comfort anyone now. All her attention was on keeping the plane alive. "Tell them to stay calm. We're nearly there. Focus on breathing, not panic." Thunder rumbled ominously, shaking the plane. Lightning illuminated the cityscape below, tiny roads and bridges glimmering through the storm's remnants. The runway wasn't visible yet, but the airstrip's lights twinkled faintly in the distance. A beacon of hope, and a final destination she had to reach. The controller's voice came again through the static. "You're doing extraordinary. We're guiding you visually. Keep heading, maintain glide speed. One more critical adjustment and we'll have you aligned with the runway." Gritted her teeth, clenching the yoke. Her arms burned, but she wouldn't release. 143 lives depended on the next minutes, and she refused to fail. The plane tilted dangerously, the storm still resisting. Yet pushed forward, muscles trembling, mind laser-focused. Each correction, each nudge, brought them closer to Seattle and closer to survival. Her heart raced as she whispered under her breath, "Come on, almost there, almost home." The runway lights flickered brighter. She could see them now, cutting through the dark storm like a path carved just for them. Knew the worst wasn't over, but for the first time since takeoff, hope glimmered in the cockpit. The runway lights grew larger through the cockpit window, slicing through the storm like distant stars guiding her home. Hands ached from hours of tension, but she refused to loosen her grip on the yoke. Every inch of the 737 responded only to her, trembling under the weight of 143 lives. "Flight 392, Cord Air Base crackled. You're lined up with the runway. Descend gradually, maintain glide speed. Flaps at 20, nose slightly up. You've got this." Nodded, though the controllers couldn't see her. She followed instructions, muscles trembling, sweat stinging her eyes. The plane's nose lifted slightly, the engines whining, the flaps responding sluggishly under the storm's residual turbulence. 20 knots above approach speed," she muttered, reading the instruments. "Flaps deployed, gear down." The landing gear extended with a jolt. The cabin shuddered violently. Passengers gripped seats, praying. Felt every vibration through her arms, every tremor in the fuselage like the heartbeat of a beast threatening to break free. Thunder rumbled overhead. Rain lashed the windshield, reducing visibility to near zero. Lightning cracked along the horizon. Yet the faint green and red lights of the runway pierced the darkness, a fragile lifeline. "Steady, steady," she whispered. The controller guided her gently, voice calm but firm. "Keep her level, gradual descent. Do not, you're doing amazing." Pushed the yoke forward slightly, controlling the descent, easing the throttles. Her fingers ached, her shoulders screamed. The fuselage shuddered violently as a sudden gust of wind caught the wing. The plane lurched. The nose dipped dangerously. She corrected with micro-adjustments, instinct overriding fear. Her pulse pounded so loudly she could almost hear it through the cockpit intercom. Passengers gasped. Some clutched each other. A child whimpered behind her. His chest tightened. This was no longer theory, no longer training. It was life and death, real, unforgiving, and hers to navigate. 30 feet, 2015. The controller counted down. Align the nose. She eased the yoke back slightly, lifting the plane just enough to avoid a nose-first crash. Tires screeched against wet tarmac as the landing gear kissed the runway. Sparks danced faintly along the fuselage as she held the brakes. The plane bounced, shuddered, then settled. Her arms burned from tension, her jaw ached. But the aircraft slowed, dragging its weight across the rain-slicked runway. Flaps up gradually, the controller instructed. Maintain directional control, watch crosswinds. His mind was a mix of exhaustion and focus. Every second stretched as she countered the wind, nudged the yoke, pressed pedals. The plane fishtailed slightly, then corrected. Tires screeched. Sparks flew under the wings. Then finally silence. The 737 slowed to a complete stop. Emergency lights glowed, engines idling, rain pelting the windshield. Released the yoke and exhaled so forcefully her chest ached. Behind her, the flight attendant collapsed against the panel, crying. The passengers erupted in applause, laughter, sobs. Some stood, some hugged, all shaken but alive. His hands still trembled. She leaned forward, staring at the now stationary plane. Her reflection in the windshield showed a pale, soaked woman with wild eyes, but alive, victorious, unbroken. Flight 392, you're safe, the controller's voice said softly. Everyone on board is safe. Whispered almost to herself, we made it. The cockpit doors opened and the flight attendant rushed forward. You saved them. You saved all of us. She shook her head, trying to absorb it. No, I didn't stop, that's all. Outside, emergency crews rushed forward, flashlights cutting through the storm. Leaned back in her seat, chest heaving, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. For the first time in hours, she looked around. Faces of strangers, pale and shaken, now brightened with relief. She realized then that courage wasn't about fearlessness. It was about moving forward despite it. The hardest part wasn't the storm. It wasn't the failing engines. It wasn't the exhausted muscles. It was holding herself together long enough to guide 143 lives safely to the ground. And she had done it. Lee, passenger in seat 21A, had landed a 737 morning came over Seattle like a quiet blessing. Rain still dripped from the plane's wings, but the storm had passed. Sat in the cockpit, wrapped in a blanket, her uniform soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She barely moved, still processing the reality. She had just landed a 737, alive, with 143 passengers still alive. Emergency crews milled around the runway, lights flashing. Paramedics checked passengers. Flight attendants hugged each other. Somewhere behind the fuselage, a child laughed, tears still on her cheeks, realizing they were safe. Could hear the distant hum of reporters' cameras already arriving. The headlines would come soon. Passenger lands jet, saves 143 lives. A voice called her name. She turned to see the Cord Air Base controller, stepping onto the tarmac with a clipboard, wet from rain but smiling. Lee. She nodded silently, unsure what to say. You did something extraordinary, he said gently. Your voice, your composure, your instincts, you kept everyone alive. You're a hero. Swallowed, I just followed instructions. I did what I had to. He shook his head. No, you flew a plane, you saved lives. That's not just instructions, that's courage. That's instinct. That's training becoming reality under unimaginable pressure. Tears ran down her face, hot and unstoppable. She hadn't realized how tight her chest had been for hours, how deep her exhaustion ran, how near they had come to disaster. The weight of relief hit her like a wave. The media swarmed later, questions and cameras flashing. Answered as best she could, carefully choosing words. She didn't want fame, just to honor the lives she'd guided through the storm. It wasn't just me, she insisted. The flight attendants, the air traffic controllers, they saved us all together. I just happened to be the hands on the yoke. Back in the hospital, passengers left messages, hugs, and even small gifts. Some never left her side, shaking her hand, whispering, "Thank you, you saved us." Listened, nodding, numb. Later, sitting alone in a quiet room, reflected on the storm, literal and metaphorical, that had forced her to become someone she never expected to be. Seat 21, A had been ordinary once. A window to pass the time, to watch clouds float by. Now it was a symbol, a launching point for courage she didn't know she had. Her thoughts drifted to the unconscious pilots. She hoped they would recover fully. She hoped no one blamed them, because the real story wasn't failure, it was resilience. It was how ordinary moments could demand extraordinary responses. She reached for her phone, scrolling through news alerts. Passenger becomes pilot, lands plane safely. Headlines screamed her name, yet felt strangely detached. It wasn't about fame. It was about survival, about responsibility, about the fragile beauty of life and the moments that forced ordinary people to rise. Weeks later, she returned to a small flight school, enrolling once again. She trained, not for headlines, not for heroism, but for mastery, because she knew how easily life could demand skills she hadn't thought she had. Every simulator, every lesson, every landing practiced was now infused with the memory of Flight 392. Her favorite seat remained 21A. It reminded her not just of fear or chaos, but of triumph. She sometimes smiled as she sat there, gazing out at clouds below, remembering the storm, remembering the control, remembering the moment she realized courage wasn't absence of fear. It was persistence in spite of it. Lee's life returned to a quieter rhythm, but inside a spark had ignited. A quiet confidence built from hours of turbulence, judgment, and adrenaline. Every time she saw a plane or a cockpit, she remembered the truth. Heroism doesn't require superpowers. It just requires someone willing to stand firm when the world falls apart. Seat 21, A had been ordinary once. Now it was sacred. Whispered softly to herself, a promise and a reflection, "I will never forget, and I will never stop flying." And in that small, unassuming seat, the girl who had been just a passenger had become something far greater, a guardian of lives, a master of fear, and the pilot of destiny.